Kara Townsend found the text by accident. It was a small thing, a vibration of her husband's phone left on the kitchen island while he was upstairs. She wasn't the kind to snoop. At least she hadn't been before. Can't stop thinking about. Last night. When can I see you again? No name. Just a number. Just 20 words that flipped her world inside out. The phone buzzed again. A second message. Miss you. By the time Aaron came downstairs, whistling, tugging his sweater into place, Kara had already put the phone back, untouched. Her hands had shaken too much to type anything. Her mouth had gone dry. She watched him, this man she had known, for 15 years and wondered, had she missed the signs? Had she blinded herself? Everything okay? He asked, reaching for his keys. Kara nodded, forcing a smile so tight it hurt her cheeks. Everything was not okay. Over the next week, Kara tried to pretend. She tried to listen when Aaron told her about client meetings, deadlines, and weekend plans. She pretended at dinner parties with friends, laughing too hard, drinking too much wine. She lied to her sister, who called and asked if she was sure she was all right. It was Saturday afternoon when she finally cracked. Aaron was out. Kara opened his laptop. No password. Maybe he trusted her that much, or maybe he was careless. Either way, she found the emails easily, dozens of them, some explicit, some tender. She learned the woman's name, Marissa Lowell, 29, a paralegal at the firm where Aaron consulted. Kara sat on the floor of their living room, laptop burning, her thighs, her heart bruising itself against her ribs. She knew she should confront him, but what she felt wasn't clean anger. It was a darker, messier thing, a low hum of wanting to destroy him back, to make him know what he had done. Monday, Kara hired a private investigator. It was almost too easy. The man, Jeff Klein, was a friend of her friend Shelby's husband. He promised discretion. In a week, he gave her photographs, Aaron and Marissa at a cheap motel off Route 46. Aaron and Marissa at a bar, his hand low on her back. Jeff slid the pictures across the cafe table. "You want me to dig deeper?" he asked, sipping his black coffee. Deeper how? Background on her. Dirt. Sometimes it helps. Kara thought about it. She imagined ruining Marissa's life the way Marissa had ruined hers. But somewhere deep, inside, a voice whispered, "Aaron chose this too." "I'll think about it," she said. The confrontation wasn't cinematic. Aaron came home late on a Wednesday. Kara had left the photos spread out on the dining table like playing cards. She didn't shout, didn't cry. She just sat there, a glass of bourbon in hand, and watched him come undone. His face collapsed into horror, then shame, then something like pleading. "Kara, please." "How long?" she asked. Her voice sounded foreign to her own ears. He hesitated. That was answer enough. 7 months, he finally said. Kara laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. 7 months of lies, 7 months of shared dinners, Netflix binges, birthday, gifts, silent betrayals under the same roof. "I never meant for it to what? Happen? Grow roots?" She slammed the glass down. Bourbon sloshed out onto the table. "You loved her?" Aaron swallowed, looked down. "I don't know," he said, so quietly she almost missed it. In the following days, they slept in different rooms. They moved around each other like ghosts, polite and hollow. Aaron tried. He apologized again and again. He started therapy. He sent long, raw emails, even though they lived in the same house. Kara ignored most of them. She couldn't trust words anymore. One evening, 2 weeks later, Kara met Marissa. She hadn't planned it. She had driven to the office, sat in the parking lot, and when she saw Marissa stepping outside, she simply got out of the car. Marissa was younger, yes, but not dazzling. Just ordinary, vulnerable looking. When she saw Kara, her face paled. She stopped walking. "You know who I am?" Kara said. Marissa nodded. "I'm sorry." Her voice cracked. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this." "No," Kara said. "It never is." For a long moment they stood there, two women on opposite ends of a shattered bridge. "I broke it off," Marissa said, tears in her eyes. "It's over." Kara studied her. She believed her, but it didn't matter. The damage was done. Months passed. Divorce papers sat unsigned in a drawer. Some nights Kara and Aaron talked for hours. Honest, painful conversations about their failures, their loneliness, the small cruelties that built up long before the affair. Other nights, she couldn't even look at him. Shelby urged her to leave. Her sister begged her to stay for the sake of the life they had built. In therapy, Kara said, "I don't know who I am without him, but I don't know who I am with him anymore either." Her therapist nodded, patient. "You're allowed to take your time." One rainy night, Aaron found Kara standing barefoot in the backyard, staring up at the dark sky. He walked toward her, hesitated, then held out a hand. She didn't take it, but she didn't walk away either. Together, they stood there, the rain soaking through their clothes, the cold seeping into their bones, neither speaking, neither sure what would happen next. Above them, the sky broke open with thunder, distant and ominous. The future was a wide, shifting thing, fragile, terrible, maybe full of possibility, maybe not. But for that one moment, Kara let herself just stand still. She stepped away from Aaron, letting the rain shield her. In the kitchen, she peeled off her wet clothes, wrapped herself in an old sweater that smelled faintly of detergent and wood smoke. She made coffee, not because she wanted it, but because she needed something to hold. Aaron stood in the doorway, dripping onto the tile, watching her like he wanted to say something but knew better. Instead, he said, "There's something else." Kara stiffened. Her fingers tightened around the mug. "Of course there is." He crossed the room slowly, keeping his distance. "Marissa. She's threatening to sue for sexual harassment." For a second, Kara thought she misheard. "What?" "She's claiming I pursued her, that it wasn't consensual." Kara barked a laugh, harsh and ugly. "And was it?" Aaron's face crumpled. "It was mutual. At least it started that way. But after I ended it, she got angry." He paused, guilt flickering across his features. "I have emails, proof. But if she goes public—" He didn't finish. He didn't need to. Kara understood perfectly. If Marissa filed suit, it wouldn't just destroy Aaron's reputation. It would drag Kara into it too. Their marriage, their finances, everything they had built would become fodder for lawyers and strangers. Kara turned away, clutching the mug until her knuckles whitened. "This is your mess," she said. "Don't you dare make it mine." But the truth was, it already was. That night, Kara couldn't sleep. She sat in the spare bedroom, laptop open, scanning legal blogs about workplace affairs, civil suits, defamation cases. Words blurred together: retaliation, wrongful termination, settlements, public records. If Aaron fought it and lost, they could lose everything. If he settled quietly, it would still cost them dearly. And even then, the story might leak. He chose this. The voice inside her was cold, relentless. Let him drown. But another part, smaller, softer, traitorous, remembered 15 years of shared mornings and late-night laughter and private jokes. Remembered that not every betrayal started with cruelty. Some began with loneliness, weakness. Kara hated that part of herself. By morning, she made a decision. She found Aaron sitting at the kitchen table, a legal pad in front of him, his pen unmoving. He looked older than she had ever seen him. A man, weighed down by the wreckage of his own making. Kara sat across from him. "I want a post-nup," she said. Aaron blinked. "What?" post-nuptial agreement. We protect my share, my inheritance, the house, my accounts. If you settle or lose, you take the hit." He stared at her, stunned. "And after that?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. Kara shrugged. "We'll see." Because the truth was, she didn't know. Maybe she'd stay. Maybe she'd leave. Maybe she'd forgive him one day, a little at a time, like rebuilding after a wildfire. Or maybe she'd never be able to look at him again without seeing the crater he had blown into her trust. She wasn't ready to decide. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But she knew one thing. She would not let his mistakes swallow her whole. Weeks later, after the post-nup was signed and the legal battle with Marissa simmered in the background, Kara sat alone in a coffee shop downtown. Stranger brushed past her table, bumping her arm. "Sorry," he said with a sheepish smile. She nodded, polite. Watching him go, Kara realized something terrifying and freeing all at once. The world was still full of strangers, full of possibilities, full of risks. Trusting Aaron again would be a choice. Staying would be a choice. Leaving would be a choice. 2. None of them easy. None of them clean. But this time, she would be the one choosing. It was early spring, and sunlight spilled across the hardwood floors, warming the empty spaces Kara used to hate for being too full of memories, full of ghosts. Aaron had moved out 18 months ago, quietly, without drama. He still sent polite emails about legal documents and taxes. Sometimes he wrote longer ones, updates about his life, which Kara mostly ignored. The lawsuit with Marissa had ended in a private settlement. Costly, humiliating, a stain Aaron would never quite wash away. Kara had survived it all. She still lived in the house, for now. She'd taken a consulting job in the city, worked long hours, built a small circle of friends who didn't know her only as someone's wife. She traveled too, Paris last fall, Japan this winter, and tonight, Shelby was throwing her a birthday party at the wine bar downtown. Kara wasn't sure she wanted to celebrate, but she would go. For herself. In front of the mirror, she hesitated. A black dress hung from her shoulders, simple and elegant. Her hair curled loose around her face. She looked different. Older, maybe. Sharper. A woman who had learned to live with scars. Her. Phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Happy birthday, I hope you're happy." Aaron, Kara stared at the screen, her heart ticking strangely in her chest. She hadn't spoken to him in almost a year. She thought about deleting the message without answering. She thought about responding something cutting, something final. She thought about picking up the phone and calling him, just to hear what his voice sounded like now. In the end, she did none of those things. She placed the phone down carefully, picked up her clutch, walked out the door into the cool evening air. At the wine bar, the music was low, the lights soft. Shelby rushed over, hugging her tight. Friends laughed, clinked glasses. Kara let herself be swept into it, the noise, the chatter, the sensation of being seen without history clinging to her skin. Later, standing at the bar waiting for another glass of wine, a man struck up a conversation. His name was Daniel. He was divorced too. Kind smile. Quiet humor, when. He asked if he could buy her a drink. Kara hesitated, just for a second, and then said yes. It wasn't a promise. It wasn't a grand new beginning. It was just a step, a small, deliberate step forward. Epilogue. Fragment. Sometimes, in the early hours of the morning, Kara still thought about Aaron, about the life they almost had, about all the ways love could rot from the inside when you weren't looking. She didn't hate him anymore, but she didn't miss him either. Mostly, she felt grateful, not for the betrayal, but for the way it forced her to see herself clearly for the first time in years. She had learned that trust, once broken, could sometimes be rebuilt, but not always with the same person. Sometimes survival meant walking away. Sometimes survival meant learning to love the life you built alone. And that was enough. The letter arrived on a Wednesday, not an email, not a text. A real letter, written in Aaron's familiar handwriting, the envelope addressed simply to Kara Townsend. It sat on her kitchen counter for 3 days before she opened it. When she finally did, it was short. I'm moving to Boston. There's someone new. I didn't know if you'd care, but I didn't want you to hear it from someone else. I'm sorry for everything. I hope you're happy. You deserve to be. No grand apology. No plea. Just a clean, brutal goodbye. Kara folded the letter once, then again, and placed it in the back of a drawer. She told herself it didn't matter. She had her own life now. Her consulting firm was thriving. She was seeing Daniel casually, their connection easy and light. She was planning a trip to Lisbon in the fall. But that night, lying in bed alone, Kara found herself staring at the ceiling, flooded with a complicated ache, not for Aaron, not for what they had, but for the sheer finality of it. Some things you survived, and they still left splinters under your skin. 1 month later. She saw Aaron one last time by accident. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon. She ducked into a downtown cafe to escape the storm, and there he was, standing in line, looking thinner, older, a touch grayer. For a moment, he didn't see her. She could have turned and left, disappeared back into the rain. But something steadied inside her. She walked over, touched his sleeve lightly. He turned, startled. His face broke into something between a smile and a wince. "Kara," he said. His voice was the same and not the same. "Hi," she said, calm. For a few awkward seconds, they stood there. Two people who had once known everything about each other, now strangers with a long, tangled past. "You look good," he said. And there was real warmth there, real regret, too. "So, do you?" she lied. "Because what else was there to say?" He hesitated, then gestured toward a table. "Do you want to?" She shook her head, gently but firmly. "I'm good," Kara said, and she meant it. Aaron nodded. Something in his posture sagged, as if he'd been hoping, or maybe dreading, something else. "Take care, Kara. You too, Aaron." She turned and left before he could say anything more. Outside, the rain had stopped. The sky was still gray, but the air smelled clean, fresh. Kara walked without looking back. Later. That night, at home, Kara sat on her porch, a glass of wine in hand, the quiet evening unfolding around her. Daniel would be arriving soon. He had tickets to a play. Something off-Broadway and messy and brilliant, exactly the kind of thing Kara would never have let herself enjoy back when she was trying so hard to be someone's wife. Her phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. "Parking now. Can't wait to see you." Kara smiled to herself. Not everything was perfect. Not everything would ever be perfect. But she was here. Still standing. Still open to the mess and wonder of the world. And that, she realized, was its own kind of triumph. The house was gone. Sold 2 years ago to a young couple who loved the old wood floors and the creaky charm Kara had once hated. Now she lived in a small, bright apartment near the water. Big windows, plants on every sill. A life she had chosen, piece by piece, like picking up scattered glass and making something new. That afternoon, she sat on the balcony, a cup of tea cooling beside her. From here, she could see the bay glittering under the late summer sun. Boats drifting lazily across the water. Kids laughing on the beach below. Daniel was inside, reading. Not the Daniel she had met years ago at the wine bar, but another. A quieter man, softer around the edges. They weren't married. Kara didn't want that again. Not exactly. They, lived side by side, fiercely independent, but tangled in the best ways. Sometimes Kara caught herself marveling at how small her world was now, and how vast it felt anyway. The letter came out of nowhere, found her through the consulting firms, public records probably. Aaron's name on the return address scrawled across the corner of the envelope. A different city again, a different life. Kara almost threw it away unopened. Instead, she slid it open carefully with the blade of a kitchen knife. Kara, I don't know why I'm writing. Maybe just to say thank you. Thank you for being the best part of my life even if I didn't realize it at the time. I hope you're well. I hope you're happy. I am trying to be better. It's a slow thing, but it's real. I just wanted you to know. No return request. No contact number. No write me back. Just the simple offering of a man trying to put his ghosts to rest. Kara folded the letter once, twice, then slid it into a drawer she hardly ever opened. Not out of anger, not out of sentimentality, but because some chapters deserved to stay closed. Honored maybe, but not relived. She poured another cup of tea. Daniel called her name from the living room, asking about dinner plans. Kara smiled, a small private thing, and rose to join him. Above the bay, the sun began to fall, spilling gold across the horizon, and Kara, standing there in the doorway of a life she had built from scratch, felt something she hadn't expected. Gratitude, not for the pain, not for the betrayal, but for the way surviving had taught her to live wide open, to forgive without forgetting, to leave when staying meant losing herself. The house was gone. Sold 2 years ago to a young couple who loved the old wood floors and the creaky charm Kara had once hated. Now she lived in a small, bright apartment near the water. Big windows, plants on every sill. A life she had chosen, piece by piece, like picking up scattered glass and making something new. That afternoon, she sat on the balcony, a cup of tea cooling beside her. From here, she could see the bay glittering under the late summer sun, boats drifting lazily across, the water, kids laughing on the beach below. Daniel was inside, reading, not the Daniel she had met years ago at the wine bar, but another, a quieter man, softer around the edges. They weren't married. Kara didn't want that again, not exactly. They lived side by side, fiercely independent, but tangled in the best ways. Sometimes Kara caught herself marveling at how small her world was now, and how vast it felt anyway. The letter came out of nowhere, found her through the consulting firms, public records probably. Aaron's name on the return address scrawled across the corner of the envelope. A different city again. A different life. Kara almost threw it away unopened. Instead, she slid it open carefully with the blade of a kitchen knife. Kara, I don't know why I'm writing. Maybe just to say thank you. Thank you for being the best part of my life, even if I didn't realize it at the time. I hope you're well. I hope you're happy. I am trying to be better. It's a slow thing, but it's real. I just wanted you to know. No return request, no contact number, no write me back. Just the simple offering of a man trying to put his ghosts to rest. Kara folded the letter once, twice, then slid it into a drawer she hardly ever opened. Not out of anger, not out of sentimentality, but because some chapters deserved to stay closed. Honored, maybe, but not relived. She poured another cup of tea. Daniel called her name from the living room, asking about dinner plans. Kara smiled, a small, private thing, and rose to join him. Above the bay, the sun began to fall, spilling. Gold across the horizon. And Kara, standing there in the doorway of a life she had built from scratch, felt something she hadn't expected. It'll stay intimate, psychological, full of emotional complexity, and end with a real sense of life still happening, still messy, still beautiful. 5 years later. The email came on an ordinary Tuesday. Kara almost missed it, buried between invoices and client requests. Subject line, old friends. It was from Marissa, the woman who had once helped destroy Kara's marriage, the woman she had blamed for years before realizing how little the blame mattered. Kara stared at the screen, her stomach tightening. She hadn't thought about Marissa in ages. Not in any real way. The email was short, formal, careful. Dear Kara, I'm writing to ask if you would consider meeting me. I owe you an apology, but more than that, I want you to hear the truth if you're willing. It's not about Aaron. It's about you. About what I stole. No pressure. If you don't respond, I'll understand. Wishing you peace. Always, Marissa. Kara closed the laptop carefully. She sat back, staring out the window. Spring again. Everything blooming, everything awake. She didn't answer immediately. Days passed. She spoke to no one about it. Not Daniel, not even her oldest friends. It was hers to decide. And when she finally answered, 2 weeks later, she kept it simple. I'll meet you one time. That's all. The meeting was a coffee shop Kara didn't usually visit. Neutral ground. Late afternoon. When Marissa walked in, Kara barely recognized her. Older, softer somehow. The sharp, brittle energy she used to carry had been sanded down by time, or maybe regret. They sat across from each other, two women who shared almost nothing except a fractured past. Marissa spoke first. I don't expect forgiveness, she said quietly. I needed to tell you I was wrong, and that it wasn't about you. It never was. You didn't do anything wrong, Kara. You were just there. You were collateral. Kara watched her, listened, felt nothing she could name. Not hatred, not even anger. Just a deep, weary kind of compassion. I know, Kara said, and she meant it. Marissa's eyes filled with tears she didn't wipe away. I hope you have a beautiful life, she said. You deserve it. I already do, Kara replied, not cruelly, just honestly. They parted without ceremony. No promises of friendship, no dramatic forgiveness scene. Just two women scarred in different ways, setting down a burden they'd both carried too long. Later, that night, Kara stood on her balcony, the city humming around her. Daniel was inside, laughing at something on TV. Their dog, a lazy aging retriever, thumped its tail against the couch. Kara leaned against the railing, breathing in the cool, sharp night air. She felt light, unburdened, whole. Not because meeting Marissa had fixed anything, not because the past didn't still live somewhere inside her, but because she had faced it, because she had looked at it, at all of it, and chosen herself again. Forgiveness wasn't always about them. Sometimes forgiveness was the gift you gave yourself for surviving, for moving forward, even when it hurt. Kara smiled. She turned and walked back inside into the life she had built with her own hands, the only life she would ever owe anything to. I'm with you. Let's continue and expand this emotional arc even more. Since we've now created Kara's emotional closure and a lyrical epilogue, the natural next step is to open the future slightly wider, to suggest how life keeps unfolding beyond the story's ending. This will be quiet, subtle, but full of meaning. A final glimpse of Kara choosing again, risking love, connection, and faith in herself, even after all she's endured. Here's the continuation. 2 years later, Kara stood at the edge of the crowded backyard, barefoot in the cool grass, a glass of champagne sweating in her hand. It was a small wedding, not hers. Daniel's niece, bright, laughing, alive, spinning barefoot across the lawn, dragging her new husband behind her like a kite. Music floated through the warm air. Fairy lights blinked in the trees. Someone's dog barked and children shrieked, with messy joy in the background. Kara watched it all, smiling. She caught Daniel's gaze across the yard. He was talking to his sister, but even from here, Kara saw the soft look he gave her. Familiar, constant. Daniel had proposed a few months ago, not with a grand speech. No kneeling, no audience, just a quiet evening at home, the two of them, on the couch, bare feet tangled, books open on their laps. "I want to keep choosing you," he had said, over and over, for as long as we get. Kara hadn't answered right away. The past lived inside her. It made promises feel heavy sometimes, even when they were beautiful. But a week later, she had woken up beside him, sunlight pooling across the bed, and her whole body had whispered yes. So here they were, planning something small, something that didn't erase the old life she had survived, but honored the woman she had become. A second beginning, not perfect, not pretending to be, just real. Daniel appeared at her side now, slipping his hand into hers easily. "You good?" he asked. Kara squeezed his fingers, laughing under her breath. "I'm better than good." He leaned down and kissed her temple, a soft, ordinary kiss that felt somehow like the rarest thing in the world. In the distance, fireworks popped against the darkening sky, bright, fleeting bursts of color. Kara watched them, feeling the tug of memory. Everything she had lost, everything she had found, everything she had become. She knew the future would still hold storms, hurt, hard choices, the ache of living. But she also knew something else now, something she had fought to learn. She could survive it all. She could build from it all. She could begin again and again without losing herself. Always forward, always her own. Final, true close. The small chapel was bathed in the soft glow of late afternoon light. The air was filled with the scent of lilies, candles, and something that smelled like hope. It wasn't the kind of wedding Kara had imagined in her youth. There was no rush, no panic, no elaborate guest list, just close friends, a few family members. A small, simple ceremony that felt more like an intimate promise than a performance. The sounds of quiet chatter mixed with the soft hum of a string quartet tuning up in the corner. Kara stood alone at the back of the room for a moment, her hand resting on the cool wood of the pew. In this silence, she felt it. The weight of everything she had survived. The long years of pain, of learning how to trust again, of letting herself want something more than survival. But also the sweetness of the moment, how much she had healed, how far she had come. Her wedding dress was simple, a cream silk slip with a slight shimmer. No extravagant lace or beading. Nothing too showy. The dress itself felt like the quiet culmination of years spent piecing herself back together. Soft, but strong. Beautiful in its simplicity. She closed her eyes for a second, letting her fingers run lightly along the fabric, feeling the warmth of the day, of everything that had brought her here. The music shifted as Daniel's niece, the flower girl, stepped down the aisle, her tiny feet kicking up a trail of petals behind her. Kara could see Daniel now, standing at the altar with the minister, his back to her. He was smiling, but there was a quiet tension in his shoulders, the kind that came from someone who knew how much this moment meant. Kara didn't rush. She moved slowly, her hand resting gently on the arm of her best friend, Sarah, who was standing beside her as maid of honor. And then, the moment when Daniel turned to see her. His smile broke wide across his face. His eyes softened, a mix of pride and love, as though she were the only person in the room. Kara's heart thudded hard against her chest, but it wasn't a nervous thrum. It was the feeling of finally being seen, of being loved fully, exactly as she was. For a moment, time seemed to stretch out. She saw herself, Not as the woman who had been betrayed, not as the one who had spent so many years wondering if love could ever be safe again. She saw herself as she was now, whole, strong, unbroken, and loved for all of it. At the altar, Daniel reached for her hands, pulling her close as she joined him. The small crowd around them was nothing more than a faint buzz now. The world had shrunk to just the two of them. The vows were simple. Kara's voice didn't tremble when she spoke. She didn't say grand, sweeping things. Instead, she said what was true, that she had chosen him, that she had chosen them. "I promise to keep choosing you," she said softly, her eyes locked on his. "Every day, for as long as we have. Not because it's easy, but because we make it worth it." Daniel's eyes glistened, but he didn't break. He held her hand steady, his smile steady, too. "I choose you, Kara," he said. "I will always choose you. Through the hard times, the messy times, the quiet times, the beautiful times." And just like that, they were married. Not in an explosion of confetti or dramatic finality, but with a quiet promise that was bound by all the invisible threads they had woven together over the years. Later, during the reception was small and intimate, held in a cozy hall with wood-paneled walls and warm lighting. The clink of glasses and laughter filled the space, but the noise felt like a soft background hum to Kara. She and Daniel danced slowly, the music soft in the background. Kara rested her head against his shoulder, feeling the weight of the moment. "Settle in." "I never thought we'd get here," she whispered, just loud enough for him to hear. He kissed the top of her head, tightening his arms around her. "You don't have to think about it now. Just be here with me." And she was. Fully. Here. The last dance. As the night wound down, Kara found herself outside on the patio, alone for the first time all day. The stars hung low and bright above her, the night air crisp and cool. She leaned against the railing, gazing, up at the sky, her fingers lightly tracing the band on her left hand. The weight of it was still new, still unfamiliar, but it felt right, like another layer to her, another part of the world she had created. She wasn't the same person who had walked into the chapel earlier that afternoon. She was someone who had faced the darkest corners of her heart and still believed in love. Someone who had fought for herself and for the quiet, gentle promise Daniel made every day. A footstep approached, and she didn't need to turn around to know it was him. "Hey," Daniel said, his voice warm in the evening air. "I thought I'd find you out here." She smiled, still facing the stars. "Just taking a moment?" "I get that," he said. "You okay?" Kara turned then, looking at him with something like wonder. "Yeah, I'm okay." And so they stood there, together, watching the world that was now their world. The past didn't feel like a weight anymore. Not exactly. Instead, it was a silent companion, a quiet foundation that kept her grounded. As Kara looked at Daniel, she knew with perfect clarity that she was choosing him again, not because it was easy, but because it was the truest thing she had ever known. This was the life she had made, the one she had fought for, and now it was time to live it. Kara stood at the edge of the park, her fingers tracing the carved letters on the wooden bench in front of her. The park was quiet this early in the morning, save for the birds stirring in the trees and the soft murmur of the distant city. She came here often, on days when she needed space to think, space to breathe. The bench wasn't a random spot. It was where she and Daniel had shared one of their first long conversations, where they'd talked about the future in that tentative, nervous way two people do when they're still learning how to trust each other. Back then, they hadn't known where their journey would lead. They'd been cautious, careful, unsure of what it meant to truly heal after everything they'd been through. But they had gotten there. Slowly, Kara took a deep breath, eyes closed, letting the memory wash over her. In the years since their wedding, there had been challenges, not just between them, but in life itself. They'd faced family tensions, financial struggles, and those quiet moments when they both wondered if they'd really made the right choice. Those times of doubt, of wondering if the pain of the past could be fully outrun. But always they chose each other. And now, as she sat here, the breeze ruffling her hair, Kara realized that her commitment to Daniel wasn't just about surviving the past anymore. It was about thriving together in the present and in the future. Date. Sound of footsteps behind her broke her reverie. She didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Daniel's voice was soft as he stood beside her. "You're here early." Kara smiled, the corners of her eyes crinkling with warmth. "Needed some air, some space to think." "About the new business proposal?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. She shook her head. "No, just about everything. Life, I guess." He sat beside her, their shoulders touching. It was comfortable. Now that closeness, quiet, without the urgency it had once had. "You're thinking about the bench again, aren't you?" he asked, his tone affectionate. Kara nodded, her fingers tapping lightly on the wood. "It feels like everything started here. It's funny, you know." "How's that?" Daniel asked, genuinely curious. "How I thought I was so far from this place. Back then, so unsure. And now," she paused, letting the weight of her words settle. "Now I can't imagine life without you, without this." Daniel's hand found hers, squeezing it gently. "I'm glad. I don't know what I would have done without you, Kara." Kara turned her head slightly to look at him. The years had added some gray to his hair, some soft lines around his eyes, but he was still the man she had chosen again and again. "I think we've both come a long way, don't you?" she said softly. Daniel chuckled, the sound rich and warm. "Understatement of the year, but yeah, we've come a long way." He paused for a beat. "And I'm proud of us." "Me too," Kara replied, her voice barely above a whisper. They sat in companionable silence for a few moments, the peaceful park stretching out around them. The sky was brightening with the promise of a new day, the future unfolding before them, as unpredictable and fragile as it always would be. But now, they both knew they could face it. Kara had learned so many lessons over the years. How to trust again. How to forgive herself, even when it was the hardest thing. How to stop waiting for the other shoe to drop and just live in the moments she had. The past had shaped her, but it no longer defined her. And when the quiet moments of doubt crept in, she had learned to sit with them instead of running from them. That was the truest kind of strength she had found, the ability to sit, to be, without the need for validation from anyone else. Just herself. As the sun rose higher, casting a soft golden light over the park, Daniel nudged her. "So, what now? Do we head back, or stay here all day and pretend we don't have responsibilities?" Kara laughed, her heart light with the sound. "Let's head back. I have a feeling we're about to get busy, and I'd like to enjoy the quiet for a little longer." They stood up, hand in hand, walking slowly back toward the car. It was one of those mornings that didn't need to be anything but what it was. Peaceful, content, shared. And when they got home, Kara knew she would sit down at the kitchen table and look over the new business plan they had been working on. And when they had that conversation, she knew it wouldn't just be about spreadsheets or strategies. It would be about how they moved forward, as partners, as people who had fought for the life they were now building, no longer afraid of the unknown. Because life was full of twists and turns, but they had learned something fundamental together. They could face it as long as they kept choosing each other. Final reflection, Kara stood at the window, looking out over the city. The view had become familiar over the years, but today it felt different, like a symbol of the life she had created. Every building, every street, every small moment of peace was something she had earned. She had learned how to love, how to trust, how to heal, and how to accept herself for all that she had been and all that she still could be. And now, the future. Kara sat at the kitchen table, her fingers gently turning the page of the novel she'd been reading. The morning sun slanted through the windows, casting soft light over the kitchen counter, where a half-drunk cup of coffee sat, forgotten for. A few minutes now, it had become a ritual, this early morning silence before the world woke up. Before their kids would stir in their rooms, before Daniel would wander into the kitchen in search of his first cup of coffee. It was her time, a time to simply be, to breathe. There were days when life felt like a whirlwind. Work, school drop-offs, late-night deadlines, and the relentless pace of their shared dreams. But the quiet moments, the ones that felt like they were standing still, were the ones she cherished most. She smiled to herself. 10 years. She thought about that first year, when everything was new and raw. They were still so careful with each other. But with every year that passed, they had become more sure. Sure of their love. Sure of their ability to face what came next. The sound of footsteps approached, and then Daniel appeared, bleary-eyed but smiling, wearing an old sweatshirt and a pair of jeans. "You're up early," he said, crossing the room to pour himself a cup of coffee. Kara looked up at him, her smile softening. "I needed some quiet." He leaned over, kissing the top of her head. "I get it." They had been through so much in the last decade, moments of tension, doubt, loss. But there was something about those quiet mornings, when it was just the two of them, that reminded Kara of what they'd built. They'd been through the storm, and now they were settling into the calm. "Kids are still asleep?" Daniel asked, leaning against the counter, his eyes tired but filled with warmth. Kara nodded. "Yeah. I think we've got about an hour before the chaos begins." He laughed softly. "Then we better enjoy it while we can." She met his gaze, and in that simple look, everything was said. They didn't need grand gestures to prove their love. They didn't need to speak every moment. There was a quiet understanding now, a trust that wasn't fragile or fleeting. It was a foundation, and it had been built carefully, patiently. The anniversary dinner. A few months later, they celebrated their 10th wedding anniversary, not with a grand party, but with a quiet dinner at home. Their children were with family, and for the first time in a long time, the house was quiet. Daniel opened a bottle of wine, and Kara set the table, a simple meal of roasted vegetables, grilled chicken, and fresh bread. The lights were low, the candles flickering gently. It felt like the evening was cocooning them in a soft embrace, a reminder of how far they had come. After dinner, they sat outside on the patio looking up at the stars. "I never thought we'd get here," Kara said quietly, her voice full of wonder. Daniel laughed. "That makes two of us. But I wouldn't want to be anywhere else." Kara smiled, her heart full. "Me neither." She reached for his hand, and for a moment the world felt incredibly still. Just them. Quiet. Content. Their lives had unfolded in ways they never could have predicted. But they had weathered the storms together, and it had made their bond even, stronger. The future was still uncertain, but that wasn't something to fear anymore. They had already faced the worst and somehow come out the other side more whole. And in this moment, under the stars, Kara knew that the next chapter would be just as beautiful. Imperfect, messy, but theirs. A day in the life, a few weeks later. Kara stood in the hallway of their home, watching as their daughter ran through the house, laughing as she played with her brother. Their children were older now, but their energy still filled the house with a vibrancy that made Kara's heart swell. Daniel was at the kitchen table, balancing his laptop on one knee, his phone pressed to his ear as he spoke with a client. Life hadn't slowed down, and there were always new challenges to face. Deadlines, appointments, life's unexpected curveballs. But there was something different about this phase of their life. They were no longer fighting for survival. They had everything they needed, not because life had always been easy, but because they had built something real. One evening, months later, Daniel walked into their bedroom to find Kara sitting by the window, a soft smile on her face as she watched the sunset. He stood in the doorway for a moment, just watching her. 10 years had passed, and yet some things hadn't changed. She was still the woman who held her heart close, who taught him how to be vulnerable and open, who showed him the quiet power of forgiveness. He crossed the room, sat beside her, and pulled her into his arms. She rested her head on his shoulder, and for a moment they simply sat in silence, the world outside fading away. "I love you," Daniel murmured, his voice full of certainty. Kara looked up at him, her eyes reflecting the light of the setting sun. "I love you too." They had made it through the storm, and now they were here, together, still, and that, Kara realized, was enough. Final, open-ended reflection. As Kara looked out at the horizon, she felt a quiet contentment settle inside. Her. She wasn't the same woman who had walked down the aisle 10 years ago. She wasn't the same woman who had once thought she'd never be able to love again. She had been broken, yes. But in the space of that brokenness, she had found something more. A love that was quiet and strong, patient and true. A love that had grown over time. And now, as she sat beside Daniel, she knew that the future would still bring challenges. But whatever came their way, they would face it together. Because the hardest part, the part that had once felt impossible, was already behind them, and now they could simply live. The house was quieter now. The kids were older, out with friends, and the evenings stretched long, silent, and full of memories. Kara sat in the living room reading a book, the lamplight warm against the soft hues of the couch. Daniel was in his office working on a new project for the business. They'd both built careers that were busy but fulfilling, and they had created a life that had weathered the tests of time. Their love, the very foundation of their family, had always been patient, slow, steady, but deeply rooted. But these days, there were still days when she questioned it, when she wondered if they were drifting apart in the quiet of their routines. Kara put down the book and got up, crossing to the kitchen. The sound of the clock ticking in the hallway felt almost too loud, reminding her how much time had passed. Daniel emerged from his office then, rubbing his eyes. "I don't think I've stopped working today," he said with a weary smile. Kara smiled back. "I know. We both get caught up sometimes." She paused, her fingers resting against the counter. "Do you think we've changed?" Daniel raised an eyebrow, pushing his glasses up his nose. "What do you mean?" Kara leaned against the counter, looking at him. "I don't know. I guess I just feel distant sometimes. It's like we've gotten so comfortable, and yet there's this unspoken distance. Do you ever feel that?" Daniel was quiet for a moment, considering her words. Then, softly, he said, "I think life moves in phases. There are seasons when we're closer, and there are seasons when we're not. But that doesn't mean I love you any less." She nodded, absorbing the truth in his words. She knew it wasn't a reflection of their love, but of the shifting demands of life. Sometimes, the noise of everything else drowned out the quiet moments they used to share. But as the years had taught them, love wasn't just about passion or the grand gestures. It was the quiet understanding that, no matter the distance, no matter the quiet, the love was still there, tucked between the moments. "I love you, too," Kara said softly, meeting his gaze. He crossed the room and kissed her gently on the forehead. Then we'll make it work, like we always have. The empty nest, another 5 years passed, and the house was emptier now. Their children were away at college, visiting only occasionally when their schedules allowed. Kara and Daniel had grown used to the silence, but it felt different now, both peaceful and unnerving. They were in a new phase of their marriage, one they hadn't anticipated. It was strange to not have the buzz of family life surrounding them constantly. They had made it through the busyness of early parenting, the financial struggles, the late nights of shared stress and triumphs. Now, it was just the two of them, again. "Do you miss them?" Daniel asked one evening, setting down his book as Kara came into the living room. "Sometimes," she replied, sitting beside him on the couch. "I miss the noise, the mess, the chaos. It was alive. But then I remember how they're growing, how they're becoming their own people, and I'm proud." Daniel nodded, pulling her closer. "It's not easy watching them grow up and leave, but that's what we do, right? We raise them to live their own lives." Kara smiled softly, her fingers brushing through his hair. "You're right. We did good, didn't we?" "We did," Daniel said, his voice thick with emotion. "We really did." The second chapter, as the years went on, Kara and Daniel found themselves rediscovering each other. Their conversations turned to new adventures, books they wanted to read, places they wanted to travel. They found themselves in new hobbies, reawakening parts of themselves that had been dormant for years. They had become comfortable with one another again, in a way they hadn't been since their early days. But now, the love wasn't just the intensity of first attraction or the shared commitment they had made to survive. Now it was the steady, warm, quiet kind of love that could only come after a long time together. It was peaceful, and it was enough. One day, Kara came home from work to find Daniel on the back porch, looking up at the sky. He was sitting in their old wicker chair, the one they'd gotten when they were first married, and as she approached, she noticed the faint smile on his face. "Hey," she said, walking up the steps to the porch. "Hey, you." He looked at her with a softness that never failed to melt her heart. "I've been thinking." She sat down beside him, leaning into him as he wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "About what?" "About us. About the future," he said, his gaze turning toward the horizon. "About how we've built this life together, and how we're going to keep doing it. Even when the kids are gone. Even when the world keeps changing." He smiled, feeling the steady beat of his heart against her, the familiarity of his touch. "We will," Kara said softly. "We'll keep doing it." The final test a few months later, Kara was diagnosed with a health issue, something that would require surgery and time to recover. It wasn't serious, but it was enough to shake her. She had always been strong, but the thought of needing help from others, of being vulnerable in front of Daniel, made her anxious. During her recovery, Daniel was her rock. He was there with her every moment, taking care of everything, the household, her appointments, the daily tasks she couldn't manage. And through it all, Kara saw something in him that she hadn't noticed in years, his unwavering dedication. It wasn't just about being the provider, the fixer. It was about being there. One night, as she lay in bed recovering, Kara took Daniel's hand, squeezing it tightly. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "I don't know what I'd do without you." He leaned down, kissing her forehead. "You'll never have to find out, not as long as I'm here." The legacy of love years passed, and the love between Kara and Daniel only grew deeper. They had weathered health scares, financial challenges, and the endless adjustments that came with the ebb and flow of life. Through it all, they had learned that love wasn't just about surviving the hard times. It was about growing together. In the quiet moments, in the shared routines, and in the small gestures that spoke volumes. Their children had families of their own now, and the house had become quieter still. But the love between Kara and Daniel was a constant, like the steady pulse of life itself. In the final years of their life together, they sat side by side on the porch, watching the world shift around them. They had everything they needed, and when the time came for them to let go of this world, they did so together, quietly, peacefully, with no regrets. Their love had spanned a lifetime, and Kara knew that the threads of it would always remain, woven into the fabric of everything they had built. Final reflection. Love, Kara realized, was not a single moment, a flash of passion, or a dramatic gesture. It was built in the moments of choice, the quiet, small decisions made every day, to stay, to love, to forgive, to continue. And as she held Daniel's hand, even in the final moments, she knew this. Love wasn't just what they had created. It was who they had become, and that would last forever. End title suggestions. The quiet promise through the seasons of us. Staying still, moving forward. A life in quiet choices.